I'm here to speak on a bill that will come out of the Judiciary Committee to add a gender responsiveness work group to the JJPOC. I want to start with a little background as well. So in 2016, I had the honor of becoming the chair of the Trafficking in Persons Council here in the state. And by that time, Connecticut had already raised the age of juvenile justice to age 18. But as I began doing research, I saw that the prostitution statute in the state was still based on the age of 16. And we had another crime on the books, patronizing a prostitute, which is the purchase, where there was a mistake of age defense. So if an adult man could make the argument that he didn't know she was under the age of 16, then he could have his charge reduced. And I bring this up because I want to set the stage for the stigma with the population of girls who we see in the criminal justice system, because that's who we're speaking about. We were talking about children who were being sold for sex, who were being arrested for prostitution, and then the men who purchased them being able to say, well, she made herself look older than 18. Even though they committed a crime, they got to reduce their charge because they just didn't realize she was a child, which I don't buy at all. So that lays the groundwork. In having done that work since 2016, I've learned quite a bit from folks in the field. And we know that the majority of victims of domestic minor sex trafficking here in the state of Connecticut are Black and brown girls. They themselves have been the victims of sexual assault, sexual abuse, domestic violence. And it's those traumas that often lead them into a relationship where someone tricks them into thinking they're going to care for them and then sells them for sex. We also know that young people in the LGBTQ community who often find themselves involved in the criminal justice system had to run away from home, weren't accepted in their home. And they participate in what is called survival sex. And so they will exchange sex for a place to sleep or for drugs, and then find themselves involved in the system. And so over the years in Connecticut, we have had programs that have worked, but it comes in fits and starts. And so the purpose of the Gender Responsive Work Group is to put into state statute something that won't go away. We need to continue our advocacy, our efforts to get programs that are gender responsive here in the state of Connecticut. When someone exchanges their body for money, it causes a certain type of trauma that takes a long time to get over. Again, I have not done the direct service, but I have learned from those who have, and they explain that that type of trauma takes years to get beyond. That's why we often hear about these girls running away. There is a drawback to the life. I cannot explain it to you. There are providers who can, but there is a trauma associated with that. The other thing we see is if you have been the victim your whole life, if the very people you're supposed to trust most have abused you, then of course, when someone promises you the world, you're going to go with them. And when they start to abuse you, that just makes sense because that's what you're used to. And so these are the kids we're talking about, and we've criminalized them. And so recently in the news, we saw there was a STAR program where a lot of awful things happened. Many of us knew the potential for that to happen was there because those weren't the appropriate services. And we weren't giving the appropriate funding for that provider to be able to care for that population who has so many needs. And so the goal of this gender responsive work group is to really get it right and continue to get it right and to fund it. Because we cannot continue to allow this to go unchecked in the state of Connecticut when we know better. Yes. The other piece of why I am so supportive of this work, I truly do believe these are all of our children. I live, at this point now, it's a minute from Hartford. I used to live 5 minutes from Hartford. Why should the trajectory of my children be different than the trajectory of other children just because we live a minute apart but in two different worlds? I was saying beforehand, I right now love him to death, but I have a 14-year-old son, and some of that decision-making is a little bit problematic. And so if he wasn't white with blue eyes, blonde hair, and had a state rep as a mom living in West Hartford, he might be experiencing a whole world of difference.
Yeah.
And so it's incumbent on all of us to see these children as children, and to give them the services that they need and not incarcerate them. Thank you.